Have you ever come across something like this before? Probably not. It's quite an unusual sight, resembling something from a movie about treasure hunting, but this is real. The Ethiopian Bible is one of the most enigmatic and debated texts. Ethiopia itself is a land filled with mysteries that remain unexplained, but we'll save that story for another time. It's one of the oldest civilizations on Earth and the only African nation that was never colonized. This unique history allows Ethiopians to trace their ancestry back to Ham, a son of Noah. This connection has even been recognized by the Jews. However, today's focus isn't on the country itself, but rather on what it holds. Ethiopia is home to some of the earliest biblical manuscripts, even older than the renowned King James Version of the Bible. Aside from the 66 books found in the King James Bible, the Ethiopic Bible includes 88 books, some of which are not found in other religious texts. This Bible contains scrolls from both the Old and New Testaments, as well as some writings that were previously unknown. What's particularly fascinating is that these scrolls existed in Ethiopia long before Christianity arrived in the region in the 4th century. In other words, Christianity wasn't introduced to Ethiopia as it was to many other nations, it was already present. Since the 4th century, Ethiopia has been a predominantly Christian nation. The Egyptian traveler, monk, and historian Cosmas Indicopoulos noted that Ethiopia was a Christian country when he visited in the mid-6th century. He observed that the Ethiopian rulers welcomed many Christian refugees who escaped persecution from other regions opposed to Christianity. Some Ethiopian tribes have been practicing Christianity for over 3,500 years. Interestingly, the oldest organized Christian group in the world is not the Catholic Church, as many might think, but the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, known locally as Tewahedo, in Ethiopia. This church also possesses one of the earliest known illustrated Christian books, which includes parts of the Gospels written in Guizi, an ancient Ethiopian language. This book was discovered in 2010 in a monastery atop a mountain in Ethiopia. According to the Kebra Nagast, a sacred Ethiopian text, around the 10th century BC, an Ethiopian ruler and the famous biblical Queen of Sheba traveled to Jerusalem to seek advice from King Solomon. While the Bible mentions their meeting, it leaves out that they had a son named Menelik. Queen Sheba returned to Ethiopia with her son, who became the first emperor. In 2012, studies of the genetic makeup of many Ethiopians provided some evidence supporting the story of Queen Sheba's journey to Jerusalem and subsequent childbirth. This suggests that around 3,000 years ago, during the time Queen Sheba would have ruled, there might have been mixing between the Egyptians, Israelis, or Syrians and the native Ethiopians, further supporting the historical narrative. Despite these intriguing aspects and its authenticity, the Ethiopian Bible is often overlooked and not included in the canon of holy books. In fact, many people, even those who follow the same religion, have never heard of the Ethiopian Bible. This highlights how much effort has been made to undermine and obscure its existence. This raises an important question: why? To answer this, let's delve into a bit of history. The Bible as we know it today has undergone many changes over time. Originally, there were various versions and interpretations of the biblical texts, reflecting different understandings of what the scriptures meant. Originally, the Bible was written in Hebrew and then translated into other languages. The first major translation was undertaken by Saint Jerome, who translated the texts from Hebrew to Latin. He compiled what is known as the Vulgate around the year 400, which continues to be the primary Latin version of the Bible. The Bible initially consisted of 27 books in the New Testament and 39 in the Old Testament, the latter once known as the Hebrew Bible. In the 1st century, many books were written about the life and teachings of Jesus. However, not all these writings were accurate. Many were akin to fan fiction, fictional accounts of Jesus' life. When these books were released, the public believed they were factual. Back then, without the internet, it was difficult to verify the authenticity of these writings, and as we often see, misinformation tends to spread faster than the truth. Imagine the amount of misleading literature that was out there and the confusion it caused. This was a major concern for the early leaders of the Christian Church. Leaders of the early Christian Church gathered at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD and the First Council of Constantinople in 381 AD to decide which books should be included in the New Testament. They agreed that a book qualified as scripture if it was authored by one of Jesus' followers or someone who had witnessed his teachings. Additionally, the book had to be written in the 1st century and align with the other scriptures. Over the years, the content of what we now know as the Holy Bible has undergone many changes, but one of the most significant occurred during the reign of King James I. Despite the existence of the Vulgate for 500 years, there were still many different versions and interpretations of the Bible circulating, which troubled the king. He was concerned about the various versions popular in the 1600s and wanted a single version that would unify religious views and affirm his authority. Several clergy also urged the king to address inaccuracies in the existing translations. To resolve this issue, King James assembled 47 experts who reviewed all the different Bible translations available. They divided into 6 groups and worked separately on different sections of the Bible for 7 years. The experts tasked with creating the King James Bible had to adhere to strict rules to avoid any bias. They utilized various tools and methods to ensure their translation remained true to the original languages. When the priest and the king reviewed the work and noticed similarities despite the experts working separately, they took it as a divine sign and approved the final version, giving thanks to God for guiding them to a unified conclusion. In 1611, the King James Bible was published. Thanks to advancements in printing technology, it quickly became one of the most widely accessible versions of the Bible. The creation of the King James Bible, along with the earlier Vulgate translation by St. Jerome, led to the exclusion of certain books found in the Bible used by most Christians today, while the Ethiopian Bible retained all of its scriptures. Having gone through this brief history of the Bible, let's address why the Ethiopian Bible is often dismissed. There are several reasons for the Ethiopian Bible's lack of acceptance, but a primary one is its inclusion of additional books known as pseudepigrapha. These are texts falsely attributed to famous figures, akin to fan fiction, and are not recognized as canonical by most other Christian traditions. The books that were excluded or rejected were identified by scribes and theologians of the time as not divinely inspired. There were many texts written before and after Jesus by authors with questionable motives, and it's understandable why these were removed. For example, imagine if someone today published a book claiming Kobe Bryant wasn't a great athlete, it would likely fail and the author would face significant criticism because it contradicts known facts. However, if this book survived 500 years, future generations might begin to believe that Kobe Bryant was indeed not a great athlete. To prevent such falsehoods from misleading future generations, it's essential to address and correct them now. The Ethiopian Bible itself includes 2 sets of scriptures, referred to as the broader and narrower canons, but before we get into that, let's define what a canon is. A canon is a set of rules, principles, or criteria accepted as authoritative. For instance, it's standard for a phone to have 1 screen, and a country to have 1 president, and this channel aims for more subscribers. The more well-known of the Ethiopian Bible's canons includes 81 books. In the popular version of the Ethiopian Bible, you'll find texts like the Book of Enoch, the Jubilees, the 3 books of Maccabees, the Epistle to Clement, and 4 books of Synodos, among others. This version is quite well known and is the main focus of the video and its discussions. On the other hand, the narrow canon was developed under the oversight of Emperor Haile Selassie. He endorsed the narrow version as the official and complete Ethiopian Bible. The specifics behind this decision are complex and discussing them could lead to misunderstandings and heated debates, so I'll leave it at that and encourage you to look up more information online to understand the full context. The narrow canon excludes some texts that are included in the broader version and contains 72 books. While the broader canon includes everything in the narrow canon and more, it has not been reprinted since the early 20th century. This highlights the internal controversies, and having 2 different versions may also contribute to its lack of wider acceptance. The Ethiopian Canon offers a fascinating glimpse into how the Bible has evolved. Contrary to what many believe, the Bible isn't just a single book, it's a collection of various texts and experiences compiled over many years. This is where some of the complications arise. Different religious groups, including the mainstream or accepted ones, have historically chosen to include or exclude certain texts based on theological or personal reasons. For instance, the version of the Bible most familiar to us today was largely assembled in the 4th and 5th centuries AD. By that period, Christianity in Ethiopia had already begun to develop distinctively from Christianity in Europe and the broader Mediterranean region. This divergence continues to widen even today. The Ethiopian Bible shares many similarities with the Catholic and Orthodox Bibles, reflecting its rich and unique historical context. The Ethiopian Bible includes a few additional Old Testament books that were likely written in the last few centuries BC, a period late in the Old Testament era but before the New Testament began. It also contains extra books at the end of the New Testament that specifically address the history and structure of the Ethiopian Church. One of the reasons the Ethiopian Bible isn't widely accepted might be due to the language it's written in. The texts are in Guizi, which is challenging for those who don't speak the language to access. Additionally, the lack of translations and the unique practices outlined in the Ethiopian Bible have made it relatively unknown outside of Ethiopia. Another more controversial reason involves politics. During the early days of Christianity, the political motivations of the Roman emperor played a significant role, often prioritizing power over spiritual growth. This political influence could also contribute to the Ethiopian Bible's exclusion from mainstream Christian texts. Any scrolls that didn't align with the preferred narrative of the authorities at the time were excluded. In fact, the Bishop of Rome once instructed priests to destroy scrolls that were not included in the Bible. However, these priests cleverly hid many of these texts in vats that were later discovered near the Dead Sea in the 1940s, which helps explain the differences between the two versions of the Bible. While one version claims to be the complete Bible, the other contains what was deemed acceptable by those in power. Recently, there has been a growing interest in the Ethiopian Bible as people seek to understand what makes it unique and the truths it may contain. Ethiopian churches have responded by making the text more accessible, translating it into various languages and encouraging scholarly studies on it. I find it remarkable that this Bible has survived through so much, especially considering the attacks on Ethiopia by Muslim forces, Italy, and a devastating fire in the 1930s at the monastery where the Bible was kept. Its survival adds to the mystique surrounding this ancient text. What do you think about this Ethiopian Bible? Let us hear from you in the comments section. Thanks for watching to this end. God bless you.